22nd of December, huh? We got the stockings up in the fireplace. We have snow lightly dusting the trees outside. I got a nice cup of eggnog in my hands. I don't know about you guys, but all this holiday spirit in the air has got me raring for a good old rant. And not just any rant. I want to talk about one of my biggest pet peeves in the competitive Pokemon community right now and how we treat newcomers specifically. So buckle up. In fact, hold on to my eggnog here. I might get a little heated. Here, hold on to this. Okay. Let me paint the following scenario for you. You're a newcomer, you love Pokemon, and you think you want to take your interest level to the next level, and you just decide to dip your toes into the competitive waters for the first time. You enter a competitive Discord or subreddit or a forum or whatever with your first team you've been working on, and you say, hey guys, new to the scene here, and I want to make my new overused team competitive before I start actually laddering. Do you have any advice? You wait nervously for a response, hoping that nobody makes fun of you for not knowing the basics. And some dingus bursts into the room and goes, oh my god, is that Flygon? That Pokemon's terrible. You have to remove it. It's completely outclassed and overused by Garchomp, who does his job better in every respect. I mean, come on. I know, but I've always liked Flygon since I was a kid. And doesn't even have access to Stealth Rock or Swords Dance. Completely terrible Pokemon, to be honest. I'm surprised you'd even think that's okay for overuse. What's wrong with you? Now, let's be honest. In that scenario, do we honestly think that a newcomer is going to have that same interaction and be like, well, back to the old drawing board. I'll make a new team, I guess. No, they're going to probably feel discouraged, embarrassed, possibly overwhelmed by all the new info being thrown their way so callously. And they might even think, well, if I can't use my favorite Pokemon, I'm not sure this whole competitive scene is for me. Now, for someone like me who cares a lot about the scene and welcoming newcomers to the scene, you can understand why I would find this so incredibly frustrating and ignorant and frankly short-sighted, because it's your own community after all, and these are the same people you're scaring away. In fact, let me calm down a bit. Give me a bit of that eggnog. You drank it already? Seriously? So on the off chance you are one of the newcomers and you want to make a team around a Pokemon, but you're worried it's too bad for overuse, then this is the video for you, because I feel pretty strongly that it's not that big of a deal. Let's say that my favorite Pokemon is Arcanine. I mean, it's a cool looking fire dog, who wouldn't love it? But I look at a Pokemon like this, and as a competitive player, the first thing that I notice are its great abilities, Flash Fire and Intimidate. And what's this? It also has some good defensive stats, and you know, holy hell, it's even got access to Teleport and Morning Sun for some additional recovery. All of a sudden, these really great qualities kind of add up to being a great defensive pivot. Throw heavy duty boots on it, and can swap in on all kinds of Pokemon with its useful fire typing. Intimidate is always going to be useful in limiting physical attackers' effectiveness. And I can even Will-O-Wisp them for a burn, which halves their physical attack. And then once I've scared my opponent out with a very real threat of a flamethrower or a flare blitz, I can teleport back out and maintain my momentum. Sounds pretty great, right? But again, to a lot of snobby players, they may look at Arcanine and say, well, this doesn't really add up to an overused Pokemon. Moltres has a lot of similar things as Arcanine. It can threaten burns with its Flame Body ability, it can defog, and it has a ground type immunity as a flying type itself. Now, I have a couple thoughts as a counterpoint to this on why Moltres kind of invalidates Arcanine. First, while it is true that Moltres does do many things more effectively than Arcanine, it doesn't do everything as well. They're not simple binary Pokemon with like 3 stats, and whichever has the greater stats is better. They're complicated. They have different things that interact with teams in different ways. Arcanine takes much less damage from physical attackers from Moltres, and it builds more momentum for your team by using its negative priority teleport, which is much better than Moltres' U-turn. Not to mention, it has the option for strong physical attacks like Extreme Speed and Flare Blitz, which Moltres does not. So on an empirical level, if I have a team like this that has several weaknesses to fairy types and physical attackers and electric types, then yeah, you know what? Arcanine is going to do the job much better than Moltres in this scenario. I just think it's really important to remember that with Smogon, that every single tier is based on usage stats and usage stats alone. I've always thought that's actually very interesting, to be honest, as far as dividing a metagame, because it's just an extremely pure representation of the current meta, just distilled. But it also means that Pokemon that are easy to fit onto your teams, like Landorus Therian or Blissey, receive inflated usage and inflated representation. Usage stats do not, I repeat, do not have a one-to-one relationship with viability. When Blender played a tournament match against Seedumass and brought a Mega Glalie, we're talking about a Pokemon with like less than 1% usage on the overused ladder at that point. It is in never used right now, for example. And that's because it's very difficult to find a team where Glalie is going to be able to do its role effectively. But once you do find that team, and once you do slot it in successfully, and give it supporting pieces that give it its best chances to do its work, then all of a sudden you have a really, really good Pokemon. And if you watch that tournament game, it completely popped off. Now, I've said before that the intrinsic challenge of team building Pokemon is fitting a billion possible roles and responsibilities into 6 measly slots, which is challenging, no question about it. This is a big reason why Pokemon like Moltres hit such high usage stats. Similarly, if we're talking about pure effectiveness, maybe adding a Choice Scarfed Landorus Therian with Defog and Stealth Rock really isn't using that Pokemon close to its potential, but it's definitely filling a lot of roles that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. But it's important to remember, when you see stuff like that, that's not a sign of Landorus being broken or unwallable or something like that. It's just an easy to fit onto your team Pokemon. Now, most of what I've been talking about so far is like having a regular overused team where you have a couple, one or two of lower ranked Pokemon, fill in a couple of the gaps here and there, and do a specific role and do it very well. Like if you need a bulky status absorber to help you out with their Shifu a little bit, maybe Conkeldurr is your guy, you know, things like that. But I should also point out that there's lots of players I've run into over the years that don't like to have any overused ranked Pokemon when they're playing overused themselves. And I'll admit, I find people with this mentality a little bit hard to understand. I think it's a pride thing, or even in some cases disdain for people using mainstream Pokemon, because they're often usually like making fun of me, for example, for having a lot of overused Pokemon in my team, which is weird because like we're in overused. What do you expect here? And it kind of rubs me the wrong way, because just like someone should be shamed for playing their favorites, nobody should be shamed for enjoying current in meta Pokemon. But I bring this up to also mention that if your favorite Pokemon has a low usage ranking, then maybe you should consider playing that tier. And I don't mean that as a dismissive point at all. I mean that as someone who enjoys the lower tiers a great deal. Because to go back to that Arcanine I mentioned earlier, sure, it's ranked and never used, and it isn't exactly mainstream in OU right now, but down in NU, Arcanine is a god right now. It completely topped the usage stats for the most recent rankings by a pretty substantial margin with both defensive sets and offensive sets. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if it's necessarily the best Pokemon in the tier due to usage stats alone, because again, there's more to it than that, but there's no question that you can make it work in NU right now, and it's very fun to use. So again, if you want to try out a lesser used Pokemon, maybe give it a shot in a lower tier before you go straight to overused. And as for my final point on why you can and should use any Pokemon you want, is going to be a bit of a brief story from me. So right when I was first getting really hooked up Pokemon Showdown and playing it all the time and playing a ton of black and white overused actually, I asked my buddy Austin if he wanted to play with me. Now, he really hasn't touched the Pokemon series since Ruby and Sapphire came out when we were kids, but he's one of those great guys who's down for anything, always down to just play whatever's going down at the moment. So he was still a little bit on the fence about it though, until I said, okay, Austin, what's your favorite Pokemon? I'll build a team around it and we can hit the ladder and have some fun. He said Umbreon, to which I said, okay, yeah, I mean, Umbreon for sure, I can totally work with that. You know, it's a great defensive Pokemon with Wish, Protect, Toxic, even Foul Play. But then he cut me off and he said, oh, I mean, back when I played, I really liked Umbreon as a bit of an offensive Pokemon. Like, I threw Shadow Ball on it and stuff like that. And he kind of seemed a little bit bashful. As like, you know, I don't know. What do I know, though? I know that Shadow Ball probably doesn't make that much sense on Umbreon. Don't worry, man. It's probably stupid in a competitive environment. And forget about it. And I cut him off and I said, offensive Umbreon? Okay, sounds fun. Let's do it. So I sat down, made a pretty basic offensive shell around the Umbreon, and we went to work playing the ladder together. And you know what? It wasn't amazing, obviously, but that choice banded Umbreon, while extremely dumb, don't get me wrong, ended up having some good success. Banded Payback hits really hard when you have maximum invest attack, and it took some pretty ballsy reads, but we managed to snake some big KOs with Banded Sucker Punch and Banded Pursuit too, which is always good in that metagame, of course. And that's true in lots of cases beyond this specific example. Just take a look at most top Showdown YouTubers. They use Pokemon like Tauros and Frostmoth and Overused and kill it in super high ladder games with like top 500 rankings to boot. You know, it really doesn't have to be that restrictive. I mean, if nothing else, the Umbreon was hilarious to use, and I think my buddy Austin had a really great time with it as a result. In fact, I know he had a good time with it because he's still playing Pokemon here and there to this day. He's actually a mod on my Twitch stream and my Discord. Now, he might have shed the choice banded Umbreon since then, but as far as getting a newcomer into the scene, I'd say it's a pretty big success. Now, did we hit the top 500 of the ladder with it? No. We did get surprisingly high, if I remember right, but the ranking really doesn't matter much. The fact is, if I can be perfectly candid here for a second, I don't know if using only perfectly viable Pokemon on your team is really that essential until you hit higher ladder. Like, if someone came to me asking if it's okay to use Arcanine over Moltres and they're ranked in the lower ladder, I'd say go for it, honestly. Just chase your bliss. If you're trying to maximize a run into the top of the ladder, or maybe you're going to enter a big tournament like SPL, then yeah, maybe you could then look to super optimize your team and only have the best Pokemon for every role, things like that. But I mean, otherwise, I think people sweat stuff like this too much. Worry less about your own team and its perfect optimization and only using the best Pokemon there, and worry a little bit more about how you match up against your opponent's team, in my opinion at least. So yeah, there's my big rant I've been saving up for a while now on how frustrated I get when new players are dismissed for not using super ultra viable Pokemon 100% of the time. Come on, like, it's just Pokemon. Just play who you want to play is what I always say. It's why whenever I do make a tier list or something like that for Pokemon, I always try really hard to frame it as how easy are these Pokemon to use, instead of how purely good they are and overused or whatever like that, because that's hard to judge. Again, like I said, if you're super worried about optimization and only using a perfectly viable team, then there is always lower tiers to play too. Trust me, they're just as fun as overused. You should give them a try. But otherwise, that's gonna be me done. Hope you all don't mind me ranting too much here, because I really want to get that off my chest. But I'll see you later. Take it easy.